Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The phone slipped through sweat-slicked fingers, clattering against the cheap linoleum floor, but the damage was already done. The notification on the screen read, "Delivered," and the recipient wasn't the compassionate obstetrician Julian had intended to message, but the terrifying name at the very top of the company directory, Cash and Blackwood. Julian Vane stopped breathing. The air in the cramped employee break room seemed to vanish, replaced by a suffocating dread that clawed at his throat. He stared at the cracked screen of his mobile, the spiderweb fractures distorting the black and white image of the ultrasound he had just sent. Beneath it, a timestamp mocked him. 11:42 p.m. He had been working late, hiding in the shadows of the Blackwood conglomerate tower, trying to gather enough overtime pay to escape the hell his life had become. He was exhausted, his hands shaking from low blood sugar and high anxiety. He had meant to send the image to Dr. Eris, proof that the pregnancy was viable, proof he needed to start the medical leave process in secret. But the shattered screen, a parting gift from an ex-boyfriend who refused to let go, had registered the touch a millimeter too high. Instead of his doctor, he had sent the undeniable proof of his fertility to the CEO. The alpha of alphas. The man known in the business world as the Obsidian Blade. A man who fired people for breathing too loudly in elevators. The phone buzzed. Julian flinched as if it were a gunshot. Sender, Cash and Blackwood. Asterisk message, my office. Now, asterisk. Julian's knees buckled. There was no running. The elevators were monitored, the exits were guarded. He was a low-level archivist, an omega trying to pass as a beta to keep his job, and he had just exposed his most vulnerable secret to the predator at the top of the food chain. He smoothed his frayed cardigan over his stomach, though there was no bump yet, just the persistent nausea and the terrifying knowledge of the life growing inside him. He walked to the elevator, the ride up to the penthouse floor feeling like an ascent to the gallows. When the door slid open, the scent hit him first. It was overpowering, crushed cedar, ozone, and the metallic tang of a thunderstorm about to break. It was a prime alpha scent, unchecked and aggressive. Julian choked back a whimper, his omega instincts screaming at him to bare his neck and surrender. He fought the urge, digging his fingernails into his palms until they bled. Cash and Blackwood stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the rain-slicked city of Neoviridia. He was a towering figure, broad-shouldered and encased in a charcoal three-piece suit that cost more than Julian would earn in a lifetime. He didn't turn around when Julian entered. "Mr. Blackwood," Julian whispered, his voice trembling. It was a mistake. My screen is broken. I didn't mean to." "Close the door." The voice was a low rumble, vibrating through the floorboards. Julian obeyed, the click of the latch sounding like a prison cell locking. Cashin turned. He was devastatingly handsome in a sharp, cruel way. High cheekbones, eyes the color of cold steel, and a mouth set in a permanent line of dissatisfaction. He held his own phone in his hand, the screen glowing. "Explain," Cashin said, lifting the phone. "You are an archivist. Grade C employee. Your file says beta. This," he gestured to the ultrasound image, "says omega. Lying on employment documents is grounds for immediate termination and a lawsuit for corporate fraud." "Please," Julian begged, stepping forward, his hands clasped. "I need this job. I'm alone. I needed to hide it. It won't affect my work." Cashin stepped closer, the predatory grace of a jungle cat stalking a wounded bird. He invaded Julian's personal space, inhaling deeply. "You smell like fear." And he paused, his eyes narrowing. "Vanilla. Burnt sugar." Julian stepped back, hitting the heavy mahogany desk. "I will resign. Just please, don't sue me. I have nothing." "Who is the father?" Cashin asked, his voice devoid of emotion. He is not in the picture. Is he the one who broke your phone?" Cashin's gaze dropped to the device clutched in Julian's hand. He was observant, terrifyingly so. Is he the reason a pregnant omega is working overtime in a freezing archive instead of resting? Julian looked away, shame burning his cheeks. "That is personal, sir." "Nothing is personal when you send it to my private number," Cashin countered coldly. He moved around the desk and sat in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. "Sit." Julian sat on the edge of the guest chair, ready to bolt. I have a problem, Mr. Vane. Cashin began, his tone shifting from interrogation to a business proposal. The board of directors is restless. My grandfather's will has a stipulation. To secure full control of the Asian Pacific Division, I must be settled. Family-oriented. They believe I am too volatile, too cold to lead without a tether. Julian blinked, confused. I don't understand. I need a spouse. I need an heir. Or at least, the appearance of one. Cashin's steel eyes locked onto Julian's terrified hazel ones. And you need protection. You need money. And judging by the bruising on your wrist you're trying to hide with that sleeve, you need a barrier between you and whoever fathered that child. Julian instinctively pulled his sleeve down. Marcus had grabbed him hard 3 days ago when Julian refused to give him money for gambling. Are you proposing a deal? Julian asked, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. I am proposing a transaction, Cashin corrected. You will marry me. You will live in my home. You will carry that child to term, and we will present it as mine. In exchange, I clear your debts, I provide you with the best medical care in the country, and I ensure that the biological father never comes within 10 miles of you again. Why me? Julian whispered. You could have anyone. Models, heiresses. Because you are desperate, Cashin said, brutal in his honesty. And because you are already pregnant. It accelerates my timeline by months. I don't have time to court someone. I don't have time to wait for conception. You are here. You are convenient. And you are terrified. That makes you loyal. It was the most unromantic proposal in history. It was cold, calculated, and insulting. And it was Julian's only lifeline. If I say no, you walk out that door, Cashin said, leaning back. You lose your job for falsifying records. You face the winter, pregnant and alone, with an abusive ex on your trail. The cruelty of the truth stung tears into Julian's eyes. He looked at the ultrasound on Cashin's desk, the tiny, gray smudge that was his baby. He would do anything for it. Even sell his soul to the devil. Fine, Julian whispered. I accept. Cashin didn't smile. He merely nodded, as if closing a merger. Good. The car is downstairs. We're going to my estate to collect your things. You don't return to your apartment. Tonight. Now. The transition from a roach-infested studio apartment to the Blackwood estate was jarring. Julian found himself wandering through halls lined with silk wallpaper and priceless art, feeling like an imposter. The first month was a study in cold coexistence. They slept in separate rooms. They barely spoke over breakfast. Cashin was gone before Julian woke and returned after Julian slept. But true to his word, the protection was absolute. Julian's debts were paid anonymously. A team of private security guards shadowed him whenever he left the house. And Marcus? Marcus had simply vanished. Julian didn't ask. He didn't want to know what a man like Cashin Blackwood did to loose ends. But the emotional distance began to crack during the 4th month. Julian had been plagued by severe morning sickness, exacerbated by the stress of living with a man who treated him like a piece of furniture. One night, a violent storm lashed against the mansion. The thunder shook the walls, and the sudden drop in barometric pressure triggered a migraine that left Julian retching on the bathroom floor, unable to stand. He was curled in a ball, shivering on the cold tile, when the door opened. He expected the housekeeper. Instead, he saw bare feet and silk pajama pants. Cashin. Julian. The voice wasn't the usual bark. It was rough with sleep, but laced with something else. Concern? I'm fine, Julian gasped, trying to push himself up, only to dry heave into the toilet again. Cashin didn't leave. He didn't call a servant. He stepped into the bathroom, dropping to his knees on the expensive rug. His large, warm hand landed on the back of Julian's neck. The effect was instant. The skin-to-skin contact with a prime alpha sent a jolt of soothing pheromones through Julian's system. The nausea didn't vanish, but the panic receded. Breathe, Cashin commanded, but softly. He began to rub circles on Julian's back, his hands spanning the width of Julian's spine. You're burning up. It's just the storm, Julian managed. I'm sorry I woke you. Shut up, Cashin grumbled, but there was no heat in it. He reached for a washcloth, dampened it with cool water, and pressed it to Julian's forehead. For 20 minutes, the CEO of Blackwood Conglomerate sat on a bathroom floor, holding the hair back of a retching omega. When the worst had passed, Julian slumped against the cabinet, exhausted. Cashin scooped him up. "I can walk," Julian protested weakly. "You can barely keep your eyes open," Cashin retorted. He carried Julian not to the guest room, but to the master suite. The bed was enormous, smelling of that intoxicating cedar and rain. Cashin deposited him on the sheets and pulled the duvet up. "Sleep here. The air filtration is better in this room. It helps with the nausea." "Where will you sleep?" "Beside you," Cashin said, climbing in. "Don't get ideas. Your scent. It soothes my headache too." It was a lie. They both knew it. An alpha didn't get headaches from storms. But as Julian drifted off, enveloped in the scent of the most dangerous man in the city, he felt safer than he ever had in his life. He subconsciously drifted closer to the heat source, and in his sleep, he felt a heavy arm drape over his waist, a protective cage shielding him and the baby from the world. This slow burn ignited into an inferno the night of the winter gala. Julian was 6 months pregnant now, the curve of his belly undeniable beneath the custom-tailored velvet suit Cashin had commissioned for him. He looked ethereal, glowing with health and the lingering scent of his husband. They walked into the ballroom arm in arm. The flashes of cameras were blinding. The whispers were deafening. "Look at the way Blackwood looks at him," someone whispered. Asterisk. "I've never seen the Viper look so tamed." Asterisk. It was true. Cashin's hand never left the small of Julian's back. His eyes, usually scanning the room for threats or business opportunities, kept drifting to Julian, darkening with a possessiveness that made Julian's knees weak. Then, the illusion shattered. A waiter approached with a tray of champagne. As Julian reached for a glass of sparkling water, the waiter's hand clamped around his wrist. "You think a fancy suit changes what you are, whore?" The voice was a nightmare from the past. "Marcus." He was dressed in a stolen waiter's uniform, his eyes bloodshot and manic. Julian froze, the glass slipping from his fingers and shattering. "Marcus, you stole my kid," Marcus hissed, yanking Julian forward. "You think you can run to some rich prick and—" The air in the ballroom instantly turned heavy, suffocatingly dense with killing intent. It was as if all the oxygen had been sucked out by a vacuum. "Let him go." The voice didn't sound human. It was a guttural growl that vibrated in the chests of everyone nearby. Cashin stood there, his mask of civility completely gone. His eyes were dilated, pure black, the beast within clawing to the surface. Marcus sneered, though his hand trembled. "This is between me and my Omega. This brat is mine. He is not yours," Cashin said, taking a step forward. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, terrified of the aura radiance coming off the Prime Alpha. "He ceased to be yours the moment you raised a hand to him. And that child—" Cashin moved faster than the eye could follow. One moment he was 5 feet away. The next, his hand was wrapped around Marcus's throat, lifting the man off the ground as if he weighed nothing. "That child is a Blackwood," Cashin snarled, tightening his grip. Marcus gagged, clawing uselessly at the iron arm. "And Julian is my soul." The admission stunned the room into silence. It stunned Julian even more. "Security," Cashin barked, tossing Marcus aside like a bag of trash. "Take this filth out. If he is seen within the city limits again, I will hunt him down myself." As the guards dragged the sputtering X away, Cashin turned to Julian. The rage in his eyes vanished, replaced by frantic concern. He cupped Julian's face, his thumbs brushing away tears Julian hadn't realized he was shedding. "Did he hurt you?" Cashin demanded, scanning Julian's body. "Did he touch the stomach?" "No." Julian sobbed, the adrenaline crashing. "Cashin, everyone is staring." "Let them stare," Cashin growled, pulling Julian into his chest, wrapping his coat around him to shield him from the prying eyes. "Let them see who you belong to." He lifted Julian into his arms, ignoring the gasp of the socialites. "We're going home." The car ride back was silent, but the air crackled with electricity. When they reached the penthouse, Cashin didn't take Julian to the bedroom. He took him to the library, sitting him on the plush sofa and kneeling before him to remove his shoes. "Why did you say that?" Julian asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Back there. About your soul." Cashin paused, holding Julian's ankle. He looked up, his expression stripped of all arrogance. "Because I realized something, Julian." I didn't hire you to protect my legacy. I think I was waiting for you. But the contract, burn it, Cashin said intensely. I don't want a contract. I don't want a fake heir. I want to adopt the child. I want to be the father he never had. And I want you. Julian trembled. I'm broken, Cashin. I come with baggage. I sent you an ultrasound by mistake. The best mistake of my life, Cashin corrected. He moved up, placing his hands on either side of Julian's face. You entered my gray world and brought color to it. You and that baby. You are the only things in this life I haven't wanted to destroy. He leaned in, his forehead resting against Julian's. Let me claim you. For real this time. Not for the board. Not for the image. But because I cannot breathe when you are not in the room. Julian looked into the eyes of the man who had terrified him months ago and saw only devotion. The fear that had ruled his life for so long finally evaporated, replaced by the warm, steady beat of a love he never thought he deserved. Okay, Julian whispered, closing the gap between them. Claim me. The kiss was searing, tasting of champagne and salvation. It was the end of the contract, and the beginning of a dynasty built not on blood, but on a bond forged in the storm. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing the mighty Cashin Blackwood on his knees for his love, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who tried to kill you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, 2 men, BL, yaoi, man 1. Tall and muscular alpha, sharp jawline, dark hair slicked back, wearing charcoal gray 3-piece suit, intense protective expression, glowing steel gray eyes, hand outstretched defensively. Man 2. Slightly smaller omega, soft brown hair, wearing velvet maternity suit, looking fearful but clinging to man 1. Protective hand over visible baby bump. Background is a blurred high-end ballroom gala, crystal chandeliers, crowd of shocked onlookers in formal wear, dramatic lighting highlighting the couple, cinematic composition, emotional atmosphere, sharp focus, intricate details.